Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen King Cast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week I review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King in the chronological order of publication, and this week I'm here to talk about his latest work, Never Flinch, the crime thriller starring his favorite character, Holly. So I'm going to just jump right into it. Actually, before I do, first of all, happy July, everyone. Happy summer. I hope that you're all having a great time. If you have not done so, head on over to iTunes and leave a rating. For those of you who are just tuning in for the first time, welcome to the Stephen King Cast. I cannot believe that this podcast has been running for over 10 years now. This is wild. So if this is your first time, thank you, welcome. There's a lot for you to explore throughout the Stephen King Cast. When I first sat down to imagine what a podcast around Stephen King could look like, it was designed specifically to be a podcast that I wanted to listen to. And at the time, there really weren't any. There was just one or two podcasts, but nothing that I was looking for, nothing with a deep dive. I'm happy now that there are so many podcasts to choose from. But now that this podcast operates within a larger group of Stephen King podcasts, ratings and reviews on iTunes really help out. So if you have a couple minutes and you like the podcast as it is, as it has existed, please head on over to iTunes and leave a review. It really helps out. Also, feel free, if you have any thoughts on Stephen King, if you have any thoughts on Never Flinch, or anything related to Stephen King, just head on over to your email and send an email to stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. That will, allow for you to be able to get your email on the air. So let's talk about Never Flinch, the novel, the latest novel from Stephen King. So he begins with an effective opening, establishing recovering alcoholics, going to meetings, and focuses on one in particular who is seeking out a meeting to deal with the recent knowledge of the death of somebody that he knows. The intriguing part is knowing that a friend died in prison and died violently. Shortly after meeting this character by the name of Trig, we are reintroduced to Izzy, one of the reoccurring characters in this, Mr. Mercedes, Bill Hodges, the Holly ongoing series, and we learn that Trig has taken it upon himself to announce that he is going to murder 13 innocent people and one guilty person to atone for the death of his innocent friend. And it's a backwards version of the conceit that it's better for 12 guilty men to go free than one innocent man to be punished. It's an interesting hook. And with it, we have the thrust of our story. Shortly after Izzy's tasked with this case, we meet with Holly. The events of the previous novel are referenced, and it allows the reader to catch up with the characters in the wake of violence and horrors of the Harrises, the couple from the previous book with Holly, entitled Holly. After Holly and Izzy begin investigating what they can, the murderer Trig takes his first life after having sent out a proclamation of intent. It's free of drama and it's very matter of fact. That's the tragedy of it. And King paints this with clarity, and the lack of humanity and the lack of traumatic effect is all the more poignant for it. I did it, he thinks. I killed that woman. Her life is over. There's no guilt, only a dull regret that makes him think of his last year drinking, when every first sip tasted like death. That woman was in the wrong place at the wrong time, although the right place and time for him. There's a book she'll never finish, emails and texts she'll never respond to, a vacation she'll never take. The standard poodle may get fed tonight, but not by her. She was looking at his map, and then she wasn't. He did it, though. When the time came, he didn't blow his foot off and didn't flinch. He's sorry for the woman in the jeans and the hoodie had to be a part of his atonement, but he's sure if there is a heaven, that the woman is already being introduced around. Why not? She is one of the innocent. Now, let me just be honest right off the bat. Okay? Reading this, and it's not even 30 pages, up until this point, I was having difficulty keeping focused on the book. And like I said, it's not even 30 pages, and I have had the urge to put it down more than I've had the urge to pick it up. But after this first murder, we're introduced to the next player in the book, the women's right advocate, Kate McKay. And this, for me, is where it started to get more interesting. Longtime Stephen King fans will know that he has explored this topic and these themes and these patterns before, most notably in the 1990s through a series of explorations around domestic abuse, misogyny, women's rights, with the books Gerald's Game, Dolores Claiborne, Rose Madder, and Insomnia. Specifically in Insomnia, we saw the plot revolve around the attempted bombing of a convention center who was hosting a pro-choice advocate, Susan Day. So here, King returns to the well with another women's rights advocate and spokesperson, Kate McKay. However, this is a character who is deliberately presented to us through another's eyes, and the presentation is that of a flawed, yet human character. This is an interesting and nuanced approach. Seen through the eyes of her assistant, Corey, Kate is ego-driven and braggadocious. This is a rich counterbalance to the platform she stands upon. She's not entirely good-natured, though she supports a cause that is. And it's an interesting observation that, as I said, she's seen through the eyes of her assistant, which occurs simultaneously with the moment her assistant loses her eyesight, an horrific attack when an unbalanced critic of Kate McKay throws a thermos of what we believe at the time to be acid in her face, mistaking her for her employer. It's through Corey that we get to start to see some of the larger themes and philosophies. It's no secret that King has been politically active on social media over the last decade, and through an argument between Corey's parents, we see the dissection of the difference between understanding of what politics are. King writes, her mother wanted her to come home, ASAP. Her father, made of sterner stuff, just told her to be careful and to get some protection. He said something he's been telling her all her life. The bastards don't get to win. In the background, her mother cried, it's not politics, Frank, it's her life. Not politics, ideology, Corey thinks. Her father said, her life is exactly what I'm talking about. After Corey is used on stage by Kate as a living prop, in a heartless yet effective power move, the characters learn that the attacker is undeterred and is sending threatening photographs to let them know the looming threat is coming for them. And whatever issues that I had with the first 20 plus pages, I started to find it easier to slip into this world. Trig continues his mission and eliminates more victims behind a laundromat. It's another example of King being able to craft characters so well in such a short period of time. It doesn't take long for us to get to know the two homeless men who, after shortly being introduced, are killed under the gun of this vengeful man. These are strange glimpses of humanity that make it all the more inhumane when there's recognition among the three of them and a connection to sobriety. The mundane quality to these deaths is what sticks with me. Again, it's not glamorous. Unless I'm misremembering, these are taking place in the middle of the day, and this one takes place behind a strip mall. It's not necessarily grimy, but it's not glamorized. It's recognizable no matter where you're reading it, and it doesn't matter where it takes place. You can picture it happening 5 minutes away from your house, 30 minutes away from your house. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter if it's in the middle of the country, on either of the coasts, in the south, in the north. Doesn't matter if it's rural. Doesn't matter if it's urban. Doesn't matter if it's suburban. The idea of that strip mall with a laundromat right there, that's something that we can all envision. It's just ubiquitous throughout this country, and that's what grounds it in its horror. As Izzy and Holly continue to deduce the next steps of the killer, who we know to be Trig, and make the connection between the names he's leaving the jury members of the case that sent an innocent man to prison, Barbara Robinson, longtime supporting character of these novels, gets a personal phone call from incoming Soul Star Sister Bessie, which places Holly back at the convention center that functioned as the setting in the finale of Mr. Mercedes. This plotline is extraneous, but it's fun. Music has always played a role in Stephen King's stories. Some of his most beloved characters have been musicians, as is the case of Larry Underwood from The Stand. As a protagonist in the tale of good and evil in the post-apocalyptic America, Larry and his journey, both morally and physically, is the one that King charts from the start to finish, and the reader follows. Music quotes have always kicked off chapter and book intros, and our characters are always listening to oldies and classic rock. So it's nice to have this moment where Holly gets to just watch this 1970s soul singing legend. And it's a moment where we're able to step back and envision being a fly on the wall of this rehearsal setting for one of his heroes. In an interview, I recently saw that this character is based off of Mavis Staples, so it's not hard to imagine Stephen King just geeking out being able to watch her perform behind the scenes with her band. She's a nice moment for anyone that just likes music. Shortly after, there's another threat on Kate's life, this time in the form of anthrax delivered backstage, and with it comes the introduction to the newest character, the attacker herself, Chrissy. And I have a lot to say, but I'll get to that later. The recent attacks lead Kate and Corey to switch tracks, and rather having an off-duty male police officer perform bodyguard duties to the women's rights activists, they hire a female bodyguard, and that is Holly. Meanwhile, Trigg is losing control and is getting a taste of bloodlust, murdering Reverend Mike because he might be able to identify him as the murderer, and this is followed by the impulse execution of a hitchhiker. In the aftermath, Trigg considers the fact that he's switching out his alcoholism for murder, one addiction for another. It's a terrifying and incredible concept to explore. With Holly heading to meet her new employer, Kate McKay, Jerome is pulled in to assist with the murders. As soon as Holly meets Kate and Corey, she takes as much charge as she can and immediately starts making intelligent decisions to help keep Kate and Corey safe while simultaneously trying to find ways to spot the stalker. This causes a bit of friction with Corey, but only because Holly realizes that Corey, in some ways, is similar to Holly. It's clear that right away, Holly's going to have an uphill battle in trying to keep Kate safe. Their meeting is interrupted when the hotel alarm goes off. Kate does not want to listen to orders. All the while, Holly's in her spidey sense as it starts tingling. This push-pull is effective at creating suspension and tension, which I have found to be lacking pretty much throughout the book. Kate's bullheaded approach puts everyone in danger, but her sense of security is threatened when they return to the room, finding it having been violated with the inclusion of roadkill animals strewn around the room. Meanwhile, coming back in Buckeye City, Trigg is not only growing addicted to the murders, but his mental state is beginning to deteriorate. From the beginning, his inner voice has been characterized as that of his father. Now Trigg has begun to externalize that voice. He catches a glimpse of a grinning father in the passenger seat, which is shades of Randall Flagg in the back seat of the car in the Stand. And at this moment where Trigg realizes that he can fulfill his mission of murdering the innocent to make a larger point, he draws a bigger target and thinks ahead to the 1-2 punch of Kate McKay and Sister Bessie. Soon after, King reveals the not-so-secret that Chris and Chrissy, the two stalkers of Kate and Corey, are the same person. King gets into the backstory about the twins and how the sister died. In his anguish, Chris adopts the dead sister's persona and started living a dual life, one male, one female. This did not come as a shock, and I don't know if it was meant to be a surprise. The reveal itself isn't written to be a big dun dun dun. Like much of this book, the reveals and the events are handled matter-of-factly. I don't know if King telegraphed it, anticipated that the audience had already picked up on it, or just wrote the reveal in, like I said, this matter-of-fact, which I find to be boring, way. But it's confirmed that the suspicion that I had and the growing sense of dread that came along with it, that this is where he was going with it. So I'll take a moment now to talk about this. In 2025, the year that I'm recording this, the year that I read this in, characterizing the vengeful, mentally unstable threat as a man dressing in women's clothes, believing himself to be a woman, is at best tone deaf and at worst dangerous for the LGBTQ plus community, especially now, in this age, in this climate, with eroding rights and heightened tensions and tempers and a growing lack of empathy and support. For years, and not even but immediately following the Silence of the Lambs, the representation of a serial killer dressing in drag was regarded and criticized as being a dangerous representation for the LGBTQ plus community. And that was what, like 1990? 91, 80, 89, something around there. I mean, so to have that same concept exist so long ago and be criticized so long ago, to be revisited thoughtlessly in 2025, to me, was just mind-blowing. I was getting very concerned as I was reading it. And we're getting closer and closer to this reveal. And the reveal comes, and it's, again, not a surprise. And as I was reading this reveal, I thought to myself, unless King gets more nuanced with this character and has something meaningful to say, this is a clunky stereotype that might have been edgy 25, 30 years ago, but now it's outdated, unoriginal, and whose viewpoint it's rightfully criticized. I'll get back to it. Let's get on with the story. Meanwhile, Trigg's story gets a little bit more complicated as he picks up his soon-to-be next victim. On the way to the murder site, a news story comes over the radio announcing that 2 of the jurors in the case that he is avenging have committed suicide. In Trigg's eyes, his plan is working, and he's so excited and happy that he lets the girl live. At least he thinks that's the reason why they died, is that they were overcome with guilt. The fact that they were both jurors on the trial is more of an afterthought, but Trigg doesn't know that. Speaking of Trigg, King provides us and Holly with a cool moment to shine. Her almost supernatural detective skills are given center stage when she looks at the appointment book found at the scene of one of the crimes, and immediately upon looking at it, she's able to deduce that the name Briggs has been changed from Trigg based on the pattern of letter spacing from the other appointment. It doesn't really lead to anything, but it is a cool moment. And the next turn in the book comes when Trigg hears on the radio that the authority is looking for someone by the name of Trigg. He's been wondering when he was going to get caught, and the walls begin closing in. Again, it doesn't really affect the events of the book, because the ending still comes with the plan that he had already concocted, and it will go through regardless of this. It's not even a manhunt, and Holly's deduction of this doesn't really lead to an increase in tension or a rush to get him before it concludes. The events still occur as they would regardless of Trigg having this information or Holly having this information, which speaks to the larger issues that I have of this novel. Soon after we learn the truth about Trigg, his name is Don Gibson. He was one of the jurors. He's also the program director for the Mingo, which puts him in relation to the story and the characters orbiting Kate McKay. So clearly, I'm not enjoying this book by the tone as I'm walking you all through it. And again, the events are just occurring. And not only does he just drop the truth around Trigg's name, okay, it's not anything that is brought to Holly's attention. It's just King relating this information to us, the reader, okay? So everyone is just passive in this story, us included, okay? We can't do anything with this information. The information doesn't lead to the ratcheting of tension or the events occurring. And it's revealed that he's one of the jurors. Again, this is just something that Trigg is dwelling on. Wouldn't it have been more thrilling if Holly had deduced these pieces of information at possibly a harrowing moment when the knowledge could affect the outcome in the story? But that's not what happens. Information is simply just given to us, and there's no weight to the information. King starts what should be a ticking time bomb of a countdown. He starts incorporating timestamps into the chapters while checking in on each of the characters as they make their way through what will be this eventful day. Some of it seems in a rush and matter of fact. For instance, Corey meets to sign papers, and immediately she's just jabbed with a hypodermic needle and knocked out. It seems just sudden. It's not suspenseful. It's not shocking. It's not dramatic. Something feels very flat and off about it. It just happens. And this is where the lines of the plot converge. Trig takes Corey to his hiding spot where Chrissy had just found, again, just through coincidence. And it's here where Christopher reintroduces himself to Corey. And coincidentally, he's planning on kidnapping all of our main characters who have been on the periphery of the plot. Through sheer coincidence, Barbara just happens to get pulled into the orbit of Trig, just because. And as we barrel towards the conclusion, Holly deduces that the program director for the Civic Center was also on the jury. Again, something that we have been privy to. Okay, and this deduction doesn't really contribute towards what she needs to do next. All roads lead to Dingley Park. Corey and Barbara are kidnapped. Christopher Stewart is waiting. Trig is waiting. Kate shows up. A fight ensues. Christopher emerges and is killed immediately in the literary equivalent of it happening off camera. Kate battles Trig, but he gets the better of her. And as you can tell, I don't really know what to say. I'm just describing what's happening, and what's happening in this book is not, this is a whole Stephen King podcast where I'm supposed to, analyze the book, but there's really not much to analyze other than just kind of tell you what happens. And I can't even get too deep into what happens because things happen. That's the only way I can really describe what occurs within this book. Things happen. Holly waits outside of a door. Sista Bessie sits down, literally. Jerome runs to the door that Holly is waiting at. Holly does her best Sista Bessie impersonation in order to open the door. The door opens. Trig is on the other side of the door. Holly shoots him. And then, here's the thing. All of these events are occurring. It's supposed to be the big climax. And again, it's the actions of the characters aren't occurring because... or the plot that he is describing is not occurring because of the actions of the characters are leading the characters to have a significant outcome on the events of the plot. The plot is happening simultaneously with the characters kind of just getting caught up in it. The actions of the characters themselves are not contributing to the events. However, he is taking great lengths to describe the action, beat by beat, of the cops versus firemen baseball game with much greater detail than he is with the actual plot or the machinations of the plot and how the players are moving through it. And then, in true King fashion, a fire starts, signaling the conclusion of the story. Everyone survives. And the book concludes. That is never Flinch. So I apologize. This was a very lackluster review, if I even want to call it that. But to be perfectly honest, I found it to be a very lackluster book. My overall thoughts are that Holly doesn't do anything. The book ends with her arriving at the scene, not from putting any clues together, but because Kate left a note telling her where to go. And the only reason that Kate left a note is because Trig told her where to go. Again, characters aren't doing anything. They're just reacting, and they're not even reacting. They're just moving through the sequence of the story. And if there is a most exciting end of a spectrum, on the opposite end is the most boring thing that can happen. And King, unfortunately, settled for the most boring uh, options here for what his character should do. I mean, her big act is to shoot the villain when she arrives. But again, it's not because of any deduction on her part. It's not built up to be a big moment. It's just it's something that happens, and it doesn't seem to have any more significant weight than anything else that occurred in the book. Everything just seems stuck in the same drive, in the same gear. So honestly, I hate saying this. I didn't like it. And I wrestled with whether or not I didn't like it versus did I think it was good. And so let me actually separate that. Subjectively, I don't know if I know enough about crime fiction. Okay? Maybe on some level I'm entering this not on the best faith, or not. It's not. I'm not entering any Stephen King book on bad faith. I'm not saying that, but maybe I'm not entering it with as much as an open mind as I should. And maybe if I read more crime fiction, then I would see the tropes and the patterns that he is playing with. Possibly. I don't really read too much crime fiction. I read, the only things that are close to that would be the books of John Connolly, where his main character, Charlie, there's a ton of them at this point. And I think I've talked about this on previous episodes, because I think that fans of Stephen King would like the John Connolly, Charlie Parker stories, because first, they take place in Maine, and they're very character driven, but there's also, despite the fact that there's crime, right on the outskirts of the story and on the outskirts of the characters, there's a larger supernatural world that exists. And it's what he calls a honeycomb world. And our world bumps up against it, but never in an overt way. And in ways that, could be maybe argued that, the supernatural isn't supernatural, though it is. But those books are good. And that's crime. These are thrillers. And then I read, the Ancient Pendergast books, but those aren't really crime so much as they are just an ongoing soap opera with this FBI agent. So I'm not the best person to talk about crime fiction. I don't know enough about it to truly determine whether or not King if it's effective. To me, reading this, made me think a lot about how I felt about Mr. Mercedes. A lot of the same arguments I found myself thinking about as I was reading Never Flinch. I remember thinking about and criticizing Mr. Mercedes for. Bill Hodges was an ineffective protagonist in the book. I was able to, retroactively look back on it, understanding that, his arc took place over 3 books, in a loose trilogy. I don't even want to call it a trilogy, because Finders Keepers was kind of an anomaly. Not an anomaly, but a outlier. Whereas End of Watch and Mr. Mercedes are real bookends to each other. But his arc is spread out across these 3 books. So he takes a more active role in the 3rd book, and whereas as the first book, again, it's very similar to this. Things happen. Characters do things. But when characters do things, it doesn't necessarily mean that things happen. I hate sounding so basic, but that's kind of how I feel. It's not a real erudite description or critique, and I do apologize for that. But that's what I see from these books. But objectively, I wrestled with this. Subjectively, clearly, I didn't like it. And maybe I'm saying to myself, objectively, maybe I don't know enough about crime fiction to determine whether or not it's good. But what would make it good? Even if I take the crime fiction piece out of it. I mean, aren't there universal components to a story that I'd be looking for? And I talked a lot about this during my analysis of endings. There should be some consistency and some structure in place to judge it from an objective standpoint. And if I take that thought and extend it throughout the entire book, to me, it appears that, as I've said, the events all occur coincidentally to one another. The orbits of the characters gravitate around one another, not due to their actions or their choices, but to sheer coincidence. This renders the actual actions of the characters themselves meaningless. Yeah, Sister Bessie's upcoming concert functions as a ticking time bomb. I understand that. But damsel in distress Barbara's involvement is forced at best, coincidental at worst. What's worse than Barbara is the inelegant smashing together of the two plots. Nothing about it seems meaningful. Again, it seems to suffer from events just happening. What would be better? If the actions of one antagonist informed the actions of the other? If one functioned as a foil or a mirror to the other? Does one illuminate or reflect the other? No. Aside from obsession, no. It's as if King had two ideas and crammed them together into one book. The idea sounds great. A collision course between a religious zealot and a justice-seeking serial killer, and Holly trying to balance both before the city is rocked between this confrontation? Wow! That sounds great! The idea is there. The execution, I don't think, is. There's definitely something there. The idea of an addict substituting murder instead of alcohol is a fantastic idea, but I don't feel like it ever quite gets there. The idea of a religious lunatic programmed by her church beliefs to target women's rights figurehead, it's a great idea. It's already been done by him for the most part, but it's a great idea. Unfortunately, these two ideas never fully mesh into anything cohesive. And what's worse is that at the center of it is a main character who the author clearly loves, but is directionless in her own book. And as I stated earlier, I think that the whole characterization and plot with Chrissy is misguided in 2025. And just it made me uncomfortable just reading it. But maybe that's me. So unfortunately, I didn't like Never Flinch. And I hope that, okay, so let me think about this, because I didn't really like Mr. Mercedes. I liked Finders Keepers, and I liked End of Watch. I know I liked End of Watch more because it had paranormal components of the supernatural with, spoiler alert, Brady, he's started to gain mental powers. Okay. Then Holly appears in The Outsider. Again, that's all supernatural. So I'm more inclined to like that. If It Bleeds, again, it's supernatural. And then, I've really been wrestling with the fact that Holly, the book Holly, it's not supernatural, but I think that, if I were to argue what I enjoy about Holly versus what I didn't enjoy about Never Flinch, is that though it's not horror, neither are horror. What I enjoyed about Holly was, the image and the concept itself of these two elitist academics, these elderly, aging, elitist academics who happen to be cannibals. That concept alone is horrific. Not horrific is a condemnation of the justice system and how it can fail an innocent person. That's not horrific. And I'm not saying that it should be horror-based. But I am saying that what I like about Holly is the fact that she is faced against something horrific, something horrible, something terrible, and their crimes are being involved. But there's a difference between serial cannibals and just a murderer, who is killing to prove a point about the justice system. So I find myself gravitating more towards the danger that comes when he's, creating a more horror-based environment, and I'm less inclined to enjoy what he's producing with his crime fiction. So again, I don't know if it's fully subjective or fully objective. My feelings seem to come from the intersection of both. And I look forward to his next output, which looks to be like the concluding or third part of the Talisman story. So any concern that I have about crime fiction, I don't think will lend itself to criticisms to be found within that. So I'm sorry, guys, it wasn't my best review, but I also don't think it was Stephen King's best book. As long as he had a good time reading it and reading the reviews, I've seen reviews where people really seem to like it. So maybe it's me. Like, again, when I spoke at length for many episodes about not liking Miss Mercedes, and a lot of people said, I don't see where you're coming from. I don't get it. So hopefully I am in the minority. And hopefully most people sit down and they crack it open and they find it thrilling, and they don't see any of the criticisms that I have, and I'm just not approaching it from the right way or through the right lens, and who am I? Okay. Stephen Kingisms. AA, clearly. The book begins at an AA meeting, and it runs throughout the entirety of the book, with King being able to pull from his life experience and his memory to give us a clear definition to life in and out of the rooms. Abuse. As I stated, during the 1990s, King explored abuse, specifically the abuse of women, in a series of books spanning Gerald's Game, Dolores Claiborne, Insomnia, Rose Madder. In Insomnia specifically, the novel revolved around the targeting of a renowned defender of women's rights, and we see that concept revisited with the character of Kate McKay here in Never Flinch. Stephen Kingisms, we have I talked about AA, but we specifically have the recovering alcoholic priest. Here it's Reverend Mike. We've seen that before with Father Callahan. Sober serial killers. This book seems like an expanded version of the short story The Fifth Step, most recently published last spring in You Like It Darker. It's easy to hypothesize that Stephen King liked this idea and expanded it further with this novel. The concept is the same in both, a character who prioritizes sobriety over murder. The two are linked, as are these two stories. Easter eggs. On the calendar, as the days progress, King makes it a point to place one of the days on Monday, the 19th. As clearly a shout out to the ongoing number 19 that runs its way throughout Stephen King novels. And Cujo, the movie Cujo, is referenced. Other Easter eggs, there's constant references to The Outsider, or not The Outsider, yes, the events of If It Bleeds, the events of Holly, and the characters and events of the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. So, all in all, I wasn't a fan of it. Hopefully you were. And even if you weren't a fan of this book, I just mentioned You Like It Darker, which came out last spring, which is a great collection of short stories. Other Stephen King works that have come out, we were treated to back in February, The Monkey. If you have not seen The Monkey, I know I should do a review of The Monkey. Here's my short review of The Monkey. Go see it. It's so much fun. And we get to look forward to a couple of Bachman books come to life with The Long Walk and The Running Man. So we have some good Stephen King content on the way. And the Institute is coming out as well. So there's a lot of good stuff, hopefully coming down the pike. And that's all I got for now. Just my review of Never Flinch. And even if you didn't like the book, hopefully you liked this review. And if you liked this review, then head on over to iTunes, leave a review for me. And if you have an alternative opinion on this review, and if there's something that I missed, and if I'm talking and you're like, whoa, you are way out of line, please write into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com and let me know what I did not get out of it. What was I missing? Why did I approach this the wrong way? What did you see in this that I was oblivious to? So that I can read your thoughts on the air and hopefully clear the air from my not enjoying this particular book. So stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. All right, everyone, that's all that I have for this week. I hope that you are enjoying summer, and I hope that you have a great 4th of July for those of you who are in the States, and those of you elsewhere in the world and the multiverse. I hope that you are enjoying these summer months. And may you have long days and pleasant nights, and I will see you here next time where MOON spells Stephen King Cast.